Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. A while back, I did a video called 10 Grand Prix That Never Happened, in which I looked at 10 proposed Formula 1 races that didn't come to fruition for various reasons. Some of these got very advanced and gotten on a provisional calendar, while some of the others appeared to get in just the early planning stages. Many of you seemed to enjoy the video, and there were lots of comments about some of the proposals I didn't mention, so we now have 10 more Grand Prix that never happened. I still have quite a big list of proposed Formula 1 races, so I can't include them all in this video, so there's certainly quite a few that are missing, but I'd like to get to them in the future. Now let's just get right into it. To start off, we'll look at a proposed race at Palermo Park in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1994. Palermo Park hosted Formula Libre races from 1948 to 1950, but it wasn't long after that the circuit now known as Autodromo Oscar Juan Galvez became the home of international racing in Argentina. The circuit had hosted every World Championship Grand Prix in the country, doing so sporadically beginning in 1953, and at the time, most recently in 1981. In 1993, Argentina was looking to see Formula 1 return to the country for the first time in over a decade, and it was decided that Palermo Park was the best option to do so. The first reports of this race I could find were from August of 1993, stating that the organizers were hoping to have a date at the beginning of the season, either as the season opener a week before Brazil, or hosting a race the week after Brazil. Bob Barnard, who also designed the Adelaide Street Circuit, designed a 2.5-mile track through the park that was next to the location of the circuit from 1948 to 1950. The race was given a date of March 27th on the provisional calendar, which would have been the season opener, but the race quickly ran into problems. Some of the residents didn't want to race in the park, especially when there's a suitable track nearby, and some of the local politicians also were against the race. However, Carlos Menem, who was the president of Argentina at the time, was fully supportive of the race being held at Palermo Park. Time was quickly running out though, and the Autodrome was preparing to host the race as well if needed. By December, it was apparent that the park would not be prepared to host the season opener, so the date of the race moved towards the end of the year on October 16th, which would have made it round 14 of the championship. Problems continued to arise though, and by early 1994, it was announced that the race would be moved from Palermo Park to the Autodrome. The Autodrome wouldn't be ready to host the race in time either, so the date was given to Jerez instead for 1994, but Argentina did host races at the Autodrome from 1995 to 1998, but has not hosted a Grand Prix since. We'll stay with another circuit that was supposed to be on the F1 schedule in the early 90s, but moved to Japan for Autopolis. Plans for the Autopolis circuit were first announced late in 1989, and when they were, it was said that it would be the most advanced circuit in the world at the time. Initial plans said that they would create a complete city of the future around the track, which would include additional entertainment such as an art gallery and music and theater venues. The circuit was completed in late 1990, and at a launch event, Nelson Piquet was impressed with the facility, saying it was an interesting circuit to drive, safe, and good for overtaking. Rumors quickly spread about the track's potential addition to the F1 calendar, with the Autopolis logo featuring prominently on the Benetton side pod in 1990 and 1991. Since Suzuka already had a place on the calendar, it was rumored that the track would begin hosting an Asian Grand Prix in 1992. The track hosted the season finale of the 1991 World Sports Car Championship, but it drew criticisms due to its remote location, which made it difficult to get to. Nonetheless, the organizers announced it had secured a date on the F1 calendar for April 5, 1992, but shortly after, when the F1 calendar was released for the season, Autopolis was nowhere to be seen on it, due to the Japanese Automobile Federation rejecting its application because the track didn't have sufficient experience in hosting international races. The track then shifted to securing a date in 1993, and when the provisional calendar came out that year, An Asian Grand Prix was scheduled there on April 4th. Shortly after, though, some of the struggles of the circuit came out. It was revealed that the facility was in a massive debt, and Formula One began looking for alternatives to host the race instead. In November of 1992, it was announced that the race would be canceled, and its slot on the calendar was eventually given to Donington, which would host one of the most historic Grand Prix in F1 history that year. The track would eventually be sold and change ownership a few times over the years, and still operates today, hosting various national series such as Super Formula and Super GT. During the 1970s, the Canadian Grand Prix had found a brief home at Mosport Park, but as the decade went on, there were a couple of concerns over the venue. First, it was thought that it would be better to bring the race closer to a large metropolitan area, but more importantly, it was determined that Mosport was no longer up to F1 safety standards. One of the ideas that came up was to move the race into Toronto to Exhibition Place, which also had the backing of Labatt's, who was then the current sponsor of the Canadian Grand Prix. An official proposal was put up to the Toronto City Council, but it lost out narrowly by 2 votes, and Montreal, who was also trying to secure the race, stepped in and agreed to host it. The Canadian Grand Prix has been held in Montreal on a near annual basis since it secured the deal for 1978, but I think if Toronto hosted the race, it could have been successful too. If the idea of a race around Exhibition Place in Toronto sounds familiar, that would be because it is. The city began hosting an IndyCar race in the same area in 1986, which has also been a success and held on a near annual basis. Had the city won the F1 race, the circuit would have been between 2.2 to 2.5 miles, but would have been a bit different from the IndyCar track. Both would use Lakeshore Boulevard, but unlike IndyCar, who uses it for the back straight, it would have been the front straight for F1, and they would have continued straight at IndyCar Turn 3. From that point, they would have went through some twists and turns before rejoining on Lakeshore Boulevard. There were also proposals to move the F1 race to Exhibition Place all the way back in 1968, but those were a bit less detailed, but it appears that it couldn't overcome the opposition it faced then either. We stay with another street circuit for the next proposed race, but move to Europe this time for a race in Rome. During the 1980s, many European cities were rumored to be looking at hosting a street race, but none of them really came to fruition. The idea of a street race in Rome actually comes from Enzo Ferrari, who suggested it to the city's mayor in 1983, and he quickly got behind Ferrari's idea. In October of that year, Ferrari announced that a deal had been reached and that a race would be held in either 1984 or 1985. The proposed circuit was a 2.35 mile or 3.8 kilometer tight and twisty layout, but it didn't appear on the calendar in 1884. Work carried on for the race though, and when the 1985 calendar was released, Rome was listed as a reserve event. FISA President Jean-Marie Balestre was in full support of the event, and when asked about the possibility of Italy hosting 3 Grand Prix, he said it was fine because Rome would have been a special showcase for the sport. In late December 1984, Dallas was removed from the calendar, with Rome taking its place, and was scheduled to host the European Grand Prix on October 13th. If the original circuit wasn't twisty enough, a few more twists and turns were added to it after a FISA inspection. However, the race was beginning to face local opposition from both residents and politicians. Environmental groups also raised concerns of the amount of pollution it would produce, as well as being against cutting down trees in order to build grandstands. The opposition became too much for the race to overcome, and in March of 1985 it was cancelled, and the date was eventually moved to Brands Hatch. There was another proposal to bring F1 to Rome in the early 2010s, which I'll cover another time, while Formula E would race on a track in Rome in the same area as the proposed 1980 circuit. F1 spent a lot of time trying to bring a race to Russia, and one of those occurred in the early 2000s when they nearly raced in Nagatino Island in Moscow. The first rumors of a race came late in the year 2000, when it was announced the circuit would be built on Nagatino Island, which is near some of Moscow's biggest landmarks, and it was said that plans were to bring top-level motorsport to the circuit. Tom Walkinshaw's TWR group was working as an advisor with the organizers, and it was said that construction would begin the following spring and be completed within 2 years. The circuit was approved the following spring, and the organizers began the initial planning phase of the circuit, which led to speculation of where it would fit in the calendar when it was completed. A 2.24 mile or 3.6 kilometer circuit was revealed, which would have meant it would have been the second shortest track on the calendar behind Monaco, and it was also revealed an oval would be constructed within the facility. The organizers also stated that the track should definitely be ready to be added to the calendar in 2003. In March of 2002, it was reported that an official contract would be signed any day, but a few days later, it was announced that the race should have to wait until 2004 to be on the calendar, as the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov, was not happy with some of the clauses in the contract that dealt with advertising rights on TV. The organizers said that this would delay construction, as they couldn't start until an official deal with F1 was signed. About a month later, questions began to arise about finances for the circuit, as it was rumored that the local government wanted to get private investors responsible for the financing instead of the city. The organizers said that there were no issues though, and that they were still planning on a 2004 date, but by October of 2002, the proposal was dead, with the city blaming Bernie Ecclestone for wanting to keep all the rights for the event. The next one is probably the furthest of these 10 from happening, and it was a proposed circuit in the US, and probably at a place you wouldn't expect to host F1. In September of 2006, it was announced that there were plans to build a multi-purpose motorsport facility in Mobile, Alabama, with backing from the Earnhardt family. The facility would include a 3/4 mile oval, a dirt oval, a drag strip, and most importantly for F1, a 3.5 mile or 5.6 kilometer road course, and would be called Alabama Motorsports Park. The organizers behind the circuit stated that they're hoping to attract F1 or IndyCar races to the facility, as they didn't want to be limited to just NASCAR. At the announcement, it wasn't determined exactly where the facility would be built, but it was said that they had 4 different potential locations, all of them in the Mobile area. They would eventually settle on a location in Pritchard, which is northwest of Mobile, and in 2008, they sponsored a Ferrari in the American Le Mans Series. By 2009, the Earnhardt family removed their name from the project, with it being reported that Dale Earnhardt Jr. particularly was focusing more on his racing career. The organizers still said that the facility was on track to be built, but I couldn't find much more info after this. Funding was an issue though, as in 2011, court records indicated that the land the facility was supposed to be built on was now owned by a bank, and the investors deeded the property to avoid foreclosure. Even if this facility had been built though, there's no guarantee it would have even been on F1's radar. Next, we have another one that seems to have been pretty far from happening, but it was rumored twice in the 90s, and it's a race in Dublin, Ireland. The first proposal I could find was from 1982, and in which it was proposed to bring a street race to Dublin. The plans were to have a circuit pretty close to the city center, with a 3-year plan for the race. The first year, they would host a Formula 4 2000 race, in year 2, host a Formula 3000 race, and in year 3, they would host F1. I couldn't find much more information on this after the initial proposal, but in 1989, rumors crept up again. This time, it was reported that a race may be run on a permanent circuit that would be built near Dublin. In 1989, property developer Jim Mansfield said he was considering building a track that could host an Irish Grand Prix. However, these quickly died out when shortly after the rumors popped up, Mansfield said that while he thought about it initially, he decided to not go through with constructing a circuit. Next, we go back to America for one of the oldest proposed races I could find. In March of 1956, It was announced that a racing facility called Los Angeles International Motor Raceway would be built in Ontario, California, which is about 30 miles east of Los Angeles. The facility would include a drag strip, a half-mile oval, a mile oval, and 2 road courses, one of which would be about 4.5 miles or 7.24 kilometers, and another that would be about 5.5 miles or 8.85 kilometers. The facility would be about 3 miles east of Ontario International Airport, and it was hoped that by the summer, it could start hosting races. It was planning to initially host a Formula Libre race on the road course shortly after it opened, but the main plan was to host a round of the F1 World Championship in the years after. However, the facility quickly ran into some problems, and by June that year, it was announced that the track's opening would be delayed until the following spring, as the roads to access the circuit that were being built by the county would not be ready in time. That wasn't the only problem, though, as that August, it was announced that the proposed facility would not come to fruition due to various factors such as cost and problems with the land. Now, if a multi-purpose motorsport facility near Los Angeles sounds familiar to you, that's because it is. Shortly after this project failed, plans were announced to build a similar facility in Riverside, California, which is about 55 miles east of Los Angeles. This one would actually be completed and would host a single World Championship race in 1960 and would go on to host various forms of racing over the years until it closed in 1989. Meanwhile, in 1970, another racetrack was built in Ontario near the original proposal, and this one included a 2.5-mile oval similar to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, as well as a road course. It hosted a non-championship race for Formula 1 and Formula 5000 cars in 1971, and was rumored to host a World Championship race as well, but I'll save that for another video. F1 held its first night race on the streets of Singapore in 2008, and after running a successful event, other cities in the area considered doing the same. One of those is Bangkok in Thailand. The first reports of a race I could find in Bangkok came in 2012, in which it was announced that a deal with Bernie Ecclestone was agreed on in principle. Like Singapore, it would be on a street circuit and held at night, and the plans were for the first race to take place in 2014. The race would also have backing from Red Bull. The following spring, a layout was approved for a 3.7-mile or just under 6-kilometer high-speed circuit that would incorporate some of the city's biggest landmarks, but it was now said that the race would not be joined in the calendar until 2015. However, in June of 2013, the Bangkok Metropolitan Authority banned motor racing in the area of the city the race was planned to be in. They said that the reason for it was that the area the circuit was planned for was an area of conservation of culture and arts. They also said that the law had been under discussion for a few years and was not targeting F1 specifically. There were reports that the organizers would look for a different area in the city that they could run in, but I couldn't find if any of those were pursued further. There have once again been recent rumors about a street race in Bangkok coming in the next few years, so we'll see if it gets any further this time around. For our final one on this list, we'll go to France. The French Grand Prix was held at Magny-Cours from 1991 to 2008, but with the 2010s approaching, F1 was looking to move on from the circuit. There had always been concerns about its remote location, and the track was also criticized for not producing the best racing. Many proposals popped up to take over as the home of the French Grand Prix, with 6 of them being seriously considered by F1. Probably the most advanced of these was a circuit at Disneyland Paris. The first reports of this race I could find came in 2008, and the project had backing from Alain Prost. It had already been announced there would not be a French Grand Prix in 2009, but the aim was to add the replacement for Magny-Cours to the calendar in 2010, and it was said that the Disneyland proposal was the only one that could be ready by then. However, there are protests over things such as the race causing disruptions in the area, as well as environmental concerns. Over time, all the parties involved tried to get a deal done, but were unable to do so, and the project was eventually called off. None of the other 5 proposals at the time would come together either, and the French Grand Prix would not return to the calendar until 2018, when it did so at Paul Ricard, but that only remained on the calendar through 2022. So there's 10 more proposed Formula One races that never happened. Like I said at the start, there's still plenty more to go through, so if you want to hear about some of them, let me know, and I can make more videos in the future. Also, let me know which of these, if any, you wish actually hosted a race. Thanks for watching.